following contains images that may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. In the last episode of History Saver 1941, we explored Little Round Top and the positions of Chamberlain's 20th Maine. In this episode, we continue our journey on Little Round Top. Which I don't think any of you guys need a whole lot of explaining on this. It's the most commanding view of any battlefield anywhere in America. So we're going to head up here now to the very top portion of Little Round Top and let you guys take a look for yourself. And yes, we're taking kind of a detour off at the main route. This is the synonymous site of Gettysburg. All right. Since we're here, I'll show you guys all of the sites, including one of the biggest monuments ever of the 44th New York Infantry, 3rd Brigade, 1st Division, 5th Corps. The monument to the 12th and 44th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiments, dedicated in 1893, this castle is the largest regimental monument on the Gettysburg battlefield. It stands 44 foot high and 12 foot wide, dimensions that represent the two regiments. And it also features a spiral staircase to a second floor observation deck where we are now going. The tower, which is not open to the public, is topped by the Maltese cross symbol of the 5th Army Corps. 5 bronze tablets outside the monument display information about the regiments. Inside, more tablets display the muster rolls of each company and reliefs of Generals Butterfield and Francis Barlow. The 44th New York was commanded at the Battle of Gettysburg by Colonel James C. Rice, who took over the brigade during the battle, leaving command of the regiment to Lieutenant Colonel Freeman Connor. It brought 460 men to the field, lost 26 men killed, 82 wounded, and 3 missing. The 12th New York consisted of 2 companies, D and E. 12th New York brought 117 men into the field, and it suffered no casualties. It was commanded at Gettysburg by Captain Henry W. Ryder. And you can actually walk inside of here, and we're going to walk up the cupola, or whatever it's called, to give you the most commanding view of Gettysburg. Okay, so from here, we're going to talk about a few things. Devil's Den is out here. Valley of Death, Slaughter Pen, all of that is before you. In the far distance, you can see all around the Gettysburg battlefield, including the high water mark and the town of Gettysburg in the distance. You can also see the wheat field, the peach orchard, the trestle farm. Everything is right here in Gettysburg, and this is the most commanding view of any battlefield in America that you could possibly have. But as you come to the top of this monument to the 44th New York, you can get a bird's eye view of the entire battlefield of Gettysburg all around you. And it really puts into perspective of what these men had to go through. And if you look behind you, you can see Big Round Top, Little Round Top, the Peach Orchard. You can see the site of Pickett's Charge, the high water mark, which will be over in this distance. I mean, everything is in view from the top of this monument. So you really get the perspective what the 20th Maine had to go through. If you walk to the other side here, you get a bird's eye view of the 20th Maine's position and where Colonel Joshua Chamberlain withheld the attacks from the Alabamians, which came up these hills. So pretty cool. And then the sniper's nest is over there. We'll hit that in a minute. But this is what you're gonna get when you come to Gettysburg. Okay, we're just gonna head to the next location for you guys, but and tell you a little bit more about the battle here for Gettysburg. But before we do that, we're going to take you and, of course, show you Colonel Vincent, and show you his statue that was erected here in Gettysburg. So, overlooking the battlefield, and he understood the importance of taking the high ground, like I said earlier. He knew you had to take the high ground, you had to make use of that high position. That was your key strategy to winning a battle, was taking the high ground first and holding that high ground. And that is one of the reasons why Strong Vincent statue is standing atop Gettysburg today, is because that was kind of an ode to him. And it makes sense to be on top of the high ground. Okay, so this day in Gettysburg was really, really windy. There was a wind advisory. Wind was blowing 50 to 55 miles an hour, and you could not hear what I was saying even with a lavalier microphone in this vicinity of where we are now, Little Round Top. So just to let you know what you're looking at here, this is the Brigadier General Governor Kimball Warren's monument. This monument, of course, is located south of Gettysburg here on Little Round Top. And General Warren was out of the West Point class of 1850. He was chief engineer of the Army of the Potomac during the Battle of Gettysburg. The veterans of the 5th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment, which was Warren's first command during the war, erected this monument in August of 1888. The bronze statue stands on top of the boulder that is said to be the spot where he discovered the Confederate flanking movement that threatened the Union flank in this location. The statue cost around $5,000 in 1888 to build, and it stands just over 8 feet tall and weighs 1,500 pounds. There's a bronze tablet set into the side of the boulder, and Warren is also carved into the rock. Warren reached this point as Longstreet's attack developed on July the 2nd. He discovered Little Round Top at that time was unoccupied except for just a small group of Sentinel Corps detachment who was standing on the rock waving flags. Warren recognized the importance that Little Round Top was, and he noticed it could be the key to the entire Union flank. On his own authority, he found Vincent and Weed's brigades and diverted them to what became the desperate but stressful defense of this hill. Warren was wounded here on Little Round Top. He was nicked in the throat by a bullet, but he stayed on the field and attended Meade's Council of War later that night on July the 2nd in the Leicester farmhouse. This is where Governor Kimball Warren stood during the Battle of Gettysburg, and it's one of the most well-known monuments here on the battlefield. So we're going to hit the Peach Orchard, the Rose Farm, and the site of Pickett's Charge. But before we do that, I kind of want to tell you a little bit about the defense of Little Round Top. On July the 2nd, Strong Vincent's brigade was intercepted by a staff officer desperately seeking forces to cover the strategic position of Little Round Top. On his own responsibility, Vincent took his brigade, which included the famous 20th Maine, to hold the vital hill. When the 16th Michigan began to fall back under heavy pressure, Vincent mounted a boulder and shouted, "Don't give an inch, men!" as he brandished a routing crop that had been a gift from his wife. The line held, but Vincent was badly wounded. He was moved to a nearby farm and lived for another 5 days. General Meade recommended him for promotion to brigade general, dated to July the 3rd, but he never knew. After the battle, Vincent's wife gave birth to a daughter who died within a year and is buried next to her father. On the march to Gettysburg, he had written his pregnant wife, "If I fall, remember you have given your husband to the most righteous cause that ever widowed a woman." The nearby 83rd Pennsylvania Infantry Monument is topped by a statue of Colonel Vincent. Since it is against Pennsylvania Battlefield Commission rules to place an image of a regiment's commanding officer on a monument, the statue is not identified as Strong Vincent and officially represents a generic officer. Strong Vincent had about 1,300 men in this location, and he had rushed to the field in this hill about 4 p.m. on July the 2nd. Below, you had Texians and Alabamans of Major General Hood's division, and it became streaming out of the woods to the left here. But with Vincent being on the high ground, he was able to stream some deadly fire in that direction and push them back. And Hood's men rallied. They renewed the fight. And when the Union right flank began to crumble, Colonel Vincent went to their aid, and that's when he was wounded. Little Round Top was saved, but Colonel Strong Vincent was not. Up there you can see Little Round Top, and we've got a couple of visitors. I just had to stop the car and get out and take a couple of footages of some geese. Wow, check out the geese. And you can hear all the locusts up in between us and Little Round Top, which is right up there. I don't think they're gonna let me get any closer. Okay, so we're having to do this kind of quick because as you can see, we really can't get in here. So it's late in the evening the first day I'm here, so I drove over to make sure I could get this in the video for you guys. But on the second day of the battle, July the 2nd, at about 4 o'clock p.m., this portion of the battlefield you see behind me was the scene of a lot of deadly devastation. And this is where General John B. Hood's Confederates attacked the Union position at Devil's Den. And as you can see, there are some boulders here, some big rocks. And Alabama and Georgia troops advance from the Rocky Gorge, which is right over to my left over here. And then then you would basically, they had a sheet of flame burst from the rocks less than 100 yards away from this position. And despite losses, they came on in a heroic manner against the 4th Maine troops, and they sheltered among these boulders. And as you can imagine, you had shells exploding all over you, rifle fire always coming in. And if you're in rocks and you've ever been in the cave or anything like that and you talk, it echoes. You can only imagine what that sound was like here. And with the sound of cannons and guns going off, you had the sound of dying soldiers like the one in this photograph, which we'll pull another photograph of that up so you can see it. And then they scrambled from boulder to boulder and victimless fighting and vicious fighting. And then Confederate sharpshooters held this position in front of us for the remainder of the battle. So basically this is where you had a lot of Confederate sharpshooters at. And this is one of the most deadly areas of the battlefield. So figured we'll go ahead and get this now because they're doing some renovation works on the sidewalks. We're actually here the first week they're doing this. You can see the work going on now, and this will be closed for I think 8 or 9 months or maybe a year. But yeah, this is Devil's Den.
Men in the 44th Alabama, 48th Alabama, and 2nd Georgia moved through the rock-strewn gorge of Plum Run on July the 2nd. Their line was jagged and disorganized. One Georgia soldier described the fighting in the slaughter pen area as with iron and lead bouncing off the rocks. The fighting was rock to rock. He described their fighting was Indian fashion. With considerable difficulty, the rebels finally swept through the gorge and down into the Valley of Death, leaving behind them the dead and dying of men. In the aftermath of the fighting, the soldiers and civilians who visited the area were shocked and horrified by the carnage that they saw around them. They described this as a slaughter pen. The term was used by both photographer Alexander Gardner and sketch artist Alfred Wald. Gardner's photograph, taken here on July the 6th or the 7th, showed numerous bodies that are littered amongst the rocks, and for almost a week following the battle, the Confederate dead in the area remained unburied. As they were buried in shallow interments, the bones of these soldiers were repeatedly exposed for decades following the Battle of Gettysburg. Overworked burial details disposed of some of the bodies by pitching them into the crevices between large boulders or tossing them unceremoniously into the Plum Run Creek bed. The rocky area was one of the last areas of the battlefield to be cleared of its dead.
All right, so this is another portion of Devil's Den that I won't be able to walk into, but this is the number one place I've always wanted to see. This is the Sharpshooter's Nest. And you guys will remember this place from a famous photograph taken during the war or after the war around July the 4th, where the Confederate body, who's probably a Georgia man from what I've gathered, would have been laying right here by a photographer who wanted to take a picture of a dead body after the battle. Well, that picture is one of the most famous photographs from the Battle of Gettysburg. And as you can see, everything here looks exactly the same as it did in 1863. Nothing has changed. But as you can also see, we can't go in here. But that is the Sharpshooter's Nest here at Devil's Den, and the area of Devil's Den and the slaughter pen. That is just too cool. Wish we could go in, but it is what it is. And yeah.
The image of the Confederate sharpshooter dead at Devil's Den has become one of the most well-known photographs of the entire Gettysburg battlefield. Photographer Alexander Gardner's team recorded a dead Confederate soldier in this location, which helped create Devil's Den's reputation as a haven for rebel sharpshooters. Years later, historian William A. Frazanito demonstrated how this photograph was staged, and a body was dragged to this location. We will get into more of William Frazanito's findings at a later video in this series. So stay tuned